She was standing at the copy machine on the 14th floor when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. It was 11:47 on a Wednesday night, and she had 3 more contracts to review before morning. But something made her pick up, and the voice on the other end said quietly, almost apologetically, "Is this the wife of Rowan Ashby?" The floor tilted. She held the edge of the copy machine with her free hand and said, "Yes, this is Lauren. Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Keene. I'm calling from St. Mercy Medical in Portland. Your husband was brought in about an hour ago." "He's stable, but—" "Portland," Lauren said, "not Seattle." Not somewhere between Seattle and the client's site in Tacoma he had told her he was visiting. Portland, 90 minutes north. She wrote it down on the back of a contract. Portland, St. Mercy. She thanked the doctor in a completely normal voice. She hung up. She stood at that copy machine for 43 seconds. Then she picked up her bag, turned off her office light, and walked to the elevator. She did not call Rowan on the way down. She called her sister instead. "I need you to not say anything until I'm done talking," Lauren said when Dana picked up. And then she told her Lauren Ashby was a corporate attorney. She had spent 12 years building a reputation in contract law that made opposing counsel genuinely uncomfortable. She was precise, methodical, and had never once walked into a negotiation without knowing exactly what she was walking into. She was also, by her own admission, the kind of woman who checked the weather for a city before she packed and confirmed restaurant reservations twice. She liked certainty. She had married a man she believed was certain. She had met Rowan at a bar association dinner 7 years ago. He was a financial consultant, not a lawyer, which she had found refreshing. He wore a dark blue blazer, and he was talking to nobody. Just standing near the window looking out at the city like he had somewhere better to be and was being patient about it. She had introduced herself because she was curious about a man who could look that comfortable being alone in a crowded room. He had looked at her and smiled slowly. "Lauren," he said, after she told him her name, like he was filing it somewhere important. They talked for 2 hours. He was thoughtful and a little dry, and he asked questions that meant he had actually been listening to what she said. He remembered the name of the firm she mentioned in passing and asked a follow-up about it 20 minutes later. By the end of the evening, she had given him her card without him asking for it. He called the following morning at 9, as if he had calculated the exact right time. 4 years later, they were married in a small ceremony in the garden of her mother's house in Connecticut. Dana was her maid of honor. Rowan's best man was his college roommate, a guy named Fletcher, who gave a toast that was genuinely funny and ended with something true. Rowan has always known exactly what he wanted. I've never seen him more certain of anything than he is of you. Lauren had cried. She was not a person who cried at things, but that had gotten her. They lived in a townhouse in Capitol Hill. She had an office on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. He worked remotely mostly, traveled to clients once or twice a month. They cooked dinner together on Thursdays, their one sacred night, and had an ongoing argument about whether pesto from a jar was acceptable that had lasted 3 years without resolution. She was building toward partner. He was building toward something he described as his own firm someday, eventually, when the timing was right. It was by every measure a good life, a chosen life, the kind of life you looked at from the outside and said, yes, that one, that's the one I want. She found the hotel receipt 14 months into their marriage. It was an accident, the way most of these things are. She was looking for the car insurance card in the glove compartment, and the receipt slipped out from between 2 folded papers. The Meridian Hotel, Portland, Oregon. 2 nights. The date was a weekend Rowan had told her he was at a retreat with a client in eastern Washington. She remembered because she had asked if he wanted her to come, half joking, and he had said it was really just meetings, nothing interesting, not worth the drive. She looked at the receipt for a long time. Then she put it back exactly where she found it and said nothing. It was the kind of thing you could explain, she told herself. Hotels have corporate rates. Maybe the client was based in Portland. Maybe he had mentioned Portland and she had simply misheard Eastern Washington. She replayed the conversation twice and was no longer sure what she remembered. But she started paying attention. Small things, the way he sometimes stepped outside, to take calls he used to take at the kitchen table. The way he had password protected his laptop when it had never been locked before. And once, just once, she heard him say something before he thought she was in the room. A single low sentence, something like, I know, I'm working on it. And when she walked in, he smiled and said it was a client being difficult. She did not say anything. She kept working, kept cooking dinner on Thursdays, kept having the pesto argument. But something behind her ribs had gone quiet in a way it had not been before. Then came the phone call. She drove to Portland that night. It took 94 minutes. She had a podcast on for the first 20, and then turned it off and drove the rest of the way in silence, watching the highway lights slide past. She parked in the hospital garage and walked to the main entrance and asked for Rowan Ashby at the front desk. The woman at the desk checked her screen and told Lauren he was in room 312 and that his wife had already been called. Lauren said, No, I'm his wife. The woman's expression did something complicated and then smoothed into professional neutrality. Of course, third floor. She took the elevator. She did not think about what she was going to say. She was a lawyer. She knew better than to walk into a room without knowing what was already in it. Room 312 had a curtain half drawn across the doorway. She heard voices before she pushed it aside. Rowan's, low and careful, and another voice, a woman's, saying something Lauren couldn't quite make out. She pushed the curtain back. Rowan was in the bed, his left arm in a soft cast, a bandage above his right eye, alive and considerably less injured than she had feared. Beside him, standing with her arms crossed and her back very straight, was a woman Lauren had never seen. Late 30s, dark hair pulled back, wearing the kind of clothes you put on quickly in the middle of the night. She was holding a child's stuffed rabbit against her chest with both hands, not holding it the way you hold an object, holding it the way you hold something that belongs to someone you love. They both looked at Lauren at the same time. Rowan went completely still. Lauren, he said. Hi, she said. She looked at the woman. I'm Lauren Ashby, Rowan's wife. She kept her voice level. And you are? The woman's chin came up slightly. Natalie Drummond, she said, and then after the smallest pause, I live here in Portland. Lauren nodded. She looked at Rowan. He opened his mouth and she held up one hand, just slightly, the way she did in depositions when a witness was about to say something she didn't need to hear yet. I'm going to step outside, Lauren said. I'm going to get coffee. When I come back, I'd like to speak with you. She looked at Natalie. Both of you, if you're willing. Natalie looked at her for a moment. Something shifted in her expression, not hostility. Something more uncertain than that. She nodded. Lauren went to the cafeteria. She got 2 coffees and a tea. She sat at a table near the window and looked out at the parking structure for 11 minutes. She was not panicking, she was assessing. She was building a timeline in her head. Portland, the hotel receipt, 14 months in. How long before that? The words, I'm working on it. She thought about the stuffed rabbit. She went back upstairs. Natalie was still there. She had moved to the chair in the corner, the rabbit now on the windowsill beside a phone and a set of keys with a small photo keychain. Lauren could see the photo from across the room. A child's face. Young. 3, maybe 4. Lauren set the tea in front of Natalie without asking if she wanted it. She set Rowan's coffee on his bedside tray. She sat in the other chair and crossed her legs and looked at her husband. Tell me, she said simply. He told her. Not all of it that night. Some of it came in pieces over the following weeks, from him, from documents, from Natalie herself, who turned out to be direct in a way that Lauren had not expected and actually found she respected. But the shape of it became clear that night in room 312 under fluorescent hospital light. Rowan had met Natalie 3 years before he met Lauren. They had dated for 2 years, separated, gotten back together, separated again. When he met Lauren, he and Natalie had been broken up for 4 months. He had told Natalie it was over. He had meant it, or believed he meant it. And then 6 months into his marriage, he had called Natalie again, and she had answered, which she would later say she regretted every day since. Their daughter, Wren, was 2 years old. Lauren sat with that information for a long time. She looked at Rowan. He was watching her with the expression of a man who had spent a long time being afraid of this exact moment, and was now living it, and finding it even worse than he had imagined. Does she know about me? Lauren asked. Did she know the whole time? No, Natalie said from the corner, quietly but clearly. He told me he was separated, that the marriage was already done, and he was waiting for the right time. A pause. I believed him for longer than I should have. Lauren looked at her. How long have you known the truth? 6 weeks. And you called the hospital tonight? Wen's pediatrician is on the same floor. I was here with her this afternoon when they brought him in. She stopped. I recognized his name on the board. Lauren breathed in slowly. She thought about coincidences, about the particular cruelty of them. She looked at Rowan again. He had not said anything in several minutes. He was looking at his hands. I'm going to go home now, Lauren said. I'm going to need some time before I know what I want to say to you. She stood. Lauren, I'm not ready to hear it yet, Rowan. She picked up her bag. She looked at Natalie one more time. I'll be in touch. She drove home in the dark. She let herself in and stood in the front hallway for a moment, looking at the row of coats on the hooks, his navy one, her camel one, hanging side by side the way they always had. She walked to the kitchen. She put the kettle on. She sat at the island where they made dinner on Thursdays, and she thought about a stuffed rabbit on a windowsill and a child's face on a keychain. Her sister arrived an hour later with overnight things and did not ask a single question. Lauren wasn't ready to answer. She made tea and sat across from her and let Lauren talk in whatever order things came out, which was not a linear order at all. Dana was good at that. She had always been good at that. By 3 a.m. Lauren had said everything she needed to say for that night. She went to bed. She slept 4 hours, which surprised her. In the morning she called her managing partner and said she needed 2 personal days. She never took personal days. He said of course immediately and did not ask why. Then she started working. Lauren was a contract lawyer. She knew how to find things. She knew what to look for and where to look and how to read what she found without letting her hands shake. She went through the accounts she had access to and found the transfers she had not noticed before, not large amounts, but regular, monthly, to an account she didn't recognize. She found the second phone plan under a variant of his business name. She found his lease agreement in Portland. His name, a Portland address, starting date 22 months ago. A lease that listed 1 dependent. 22 months ago, she and Rowan had been married for 8 months. She sat at her desk for a long time looking at the lease document. Then she called Dana in. I need you to look at something, she said, and her voice was completely steady, because she had made a decision somewhere between 3 a.m. and now, which was that she was not going to fall apart. She was going to be precise. She was going to handle this the way she handled everything, with documentation and clarity, and the absolute refusal to be caught without information. She called her colleague Harriet next. Harriet was a family law attorney, sharp and unsentimental, whom Lauren had referred clients to for years. I need to talk to you about my own situation, Lauren said. I also need a referral for someone who works in Portland. Family law, paternity, civil, someone good. I know exactly who, Harriet said without a single superfluous word. 3 days later, Lauren called Natalie. It rang twice. Lauren, Natalie said with a kind of controlled steadiness that told Lauren she had been waiting. I want you to know that this call is not about Rowan, Lauren said. It's about making sure you and your daughter are protected in whatever comes next. I have documentation. My attorney has documentation. I want to give you the name of someone in Portland who can help you. A silence. Then, you're doing this for me? I'm doing it because a 2-year-old didn't make any of these choices, Lauren said. And neither did we. Another silence, longer. Okay, Natalie said quietly. Thank you. Lauren gave her the name. She hung up. She sat in her office chair and felt something she could not entirely name. Not satisfaction. Not exactly. Something more like the particular clarity that comes when you have figured out the right move in a complex negotiation. Rowan came home 4 days after Portland. He walked in the door and set his bag down in the hall and looked at her with the expression of a man who had been rehearsing and knew none of it was going to come out right. He was correct. She let him sit down. She let him get through about 40 seconds of, I know there's nothing I can say, before she told him, quietly, that she had spoken to Harriet and that papers would be filed by end of week. That she had also been in contact with a Portland attorney on Natalie's behalf. That Wren would have the financial support and legal recognition she deserved. He looked at her. You called her, yes. Why? She looked at him for a moment. He had kind eyes. She had always thought so. Warm eyes. And she understood now that eyes are just eyes. They tell you nothing about the spaces between what a person says and what a person does. Because it was the right thing, she said. And because I'm not angry at her. I'm not angry at her daughter. She paused. I'm done with you, Rowan. Not because I hate you. Because you built something on a foundation you knew was wrong, and you asked me to stand on it with you without telling me what was underneath. He pressed his lips together. For a moment, she thought he might cry. I'm sorry, he said. I know that doesn't. No, she said simply. It doesn't. She had moved her essential things out 3 weeks earlier, while he was still in Portland finishing the treatment for his arm. She stayed with Dana until the townhouse sold. It sold in 11 days. Seattle market. Even that went efficiently. The legal process was longer. But Harriet was good, and the documentation was thorough. The marriage, Harriet determined, had been entered under conditions that constituted material misrepresentation. Rowan had been in an ongoing relationship when they married. He had an existing child, partially supported by accounts that Lauren, as his wife, had indirectly subsidized without her knowledge. Harriet filed accordingly. Rowan's firm, it turned out, had problems of its own. His business partner, a man named Owen, discovered during the divorce disclosure process that Rowan had been billing a personal Portland apartment as a business expense for nearly 2 years. Owen dissolved the partnership within a month. He did not return Rowan's calls after that. It was methodical and final in the way that betrayals of professional trust tend to be. Clients followed. In financial consulting, referrals are everything. Word travels in a particular way in that world, and Rowan's word had traveled before he had a chance to shape it. The contracts dried up. He was left with his personal accounts, which were smaller than he had let Lauren believe, because the rest had been supporting a life in Portland she hadn't known existed. The divorce was finalized 9 months after that night in room 312. Lauren received her share of their shared assets, her name back as she had always had it, and the absolute clean knowledge of exactly where she stood, which was something she had not had for a long time without realizing it. She did not hear from Rowan after the papers were signed. She did not expect to. She heard from Natalie 3 months later. A short message, nothing dramatic. Ren's officially in place. She started preschool. I wanted you to know things are okay here. I hope things are okay for you too. Lauren read it twice. She wrote back 4 words. I'm glad. Thank you. She meant both. She put herself back into her work in the way that she knew how. Completely, and with a focus that her colleagues noticed. She made partner 8 months after. The divorce was final, which was something she had been working toward for years. She came home the night it was official, opened a bottle of wine, called Dana, and sat on the floor of her new apartment with her back against the couch and felt, for the first time in a long time, that the ground under her was exactly what it appeared to be. She was not looking for anything else. She had, in fact, made a private decision that she was not going to look for anything for a long time, possibly a very long time, because she had been paying attention to herself in ways she hadn't before, and she recognized that she had a tendency to invest in people the way she invested in cases, completely and without a contingency plan, and she was not ready to do that again. And then she went to the licensing renewal seminar in February, the mandatory one every attorney in the state was required to attend. And she sat in the 3rd row of a conference room in a downtown hotel with a legal pad and a terrible cup of coffee. And she met the man sitting next to her because he acted in a low voice that didn't disturb anyone, whether she had managed to find the handouts that were supposedly available at registration, or whether those had been as fictional as the parking validation. She had laughed, quietly, genuinely. Completely fictional, she said. Both of them. His name was Callum Reed. He was an employment attorney, solo practice, had been for 6 years after leaving a large firm he described as technically very good and also slowly killing me. He had a dry, unhurried manner and a way of listening that reminded her oddly of the way good attorneys listen to witnesses, fully, without preparing what they're about to say. He did not fill silences unnecessarily. He was interested in her answer before he offered his own. They sat next to each other for 3 hours of continuing education. They got lunch after in the hotel restaurant, because neither of them had eaten, and the seminar broke for 90 minutes. Over lunch he mentioned, without ceremony, that he had been through a divorce 2 years earlier, that it had been painful and clarifying in roughly equal measure, and that he was only telling her because she had said something about always preferring to know what she was dealing with, and he had thought that probably applied here. She had looked at him. That's an unusual thing to say to someone you've known for 3 hours. I know, he said, but you seem like someone who would rather have the information. He was right. She did. They exchanged cards at the end of the seminar, the way attorneys exchange cards, out of habit. She did not expect to hear from him. He called on a Thursday, which she noted, and asked if she would like to get dinner sometime. No pressure, just dinner. She said yes, because she had already decided that she was not interested in a man who was not direct about what he wanted, and Callum Reed was apparently direct about what he wanted. Dinner was at a quiet Italian place near her office. He was already there when she arrived. He stood when he saw her, not a performance, just the automatic standing of someone glad to see the person they'd been waiting for. He did not look at his phone once during the meal. He ordered dessert because he wanted it, and did not make a thing of it either way. He told her about growing up in Minnesota, with a father who had very strong opinions about hockey, and a mother who had very strong opinions about everything else. And the way he talked about his family was warm and specific and fond in a way that told her these were people he actually knew and actually liked. He asked about her family. She told him about Dana, about her parents in Connecticut, about growing up in a house where her mother was a judge and precision was a household value, the way some families have religion. He listened. He asked questions that meant he had been tracking everything, not performing interest, actually interested. At the end of the night, he walked her to her car. The street was quiet and the air was cold in the way Seattle air is cold in February, sharp and clean. He said he had a good time, genuinely, and asked if she would want to do it again. Yes, she said. He smiled. It was a real smile, easy and unguarded, and she noticed it because she had learned to pay attention to the things people showed you when they were not trying to show you anything. They dated slowly, which was his word for it and also hers. She watched how he moved through ordinary things. He showed up when he said he would. He did not say things he did not mean. He was the same person on the phone, in person, on a good day, on a bad day. She had not known how much that last part mattered until she had lived with its absence. She told him about Rowan 4 months in, not because she felt she had to, but because she found she wanted to, and wanting to was its own kind of information. She told him the whole shape of it. Portland, the receipt, room 312, ran on the keychain, the lease. She told him about sitting on the hospital cafeteria table for 11 minutes before she went back upstairs. She told him about Natalie and the rabbit and the decision she had made about how she was going to handle it. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think you handled that," with a lot more clarity than most people could have. "I didn't have another option," she said. "You did," he said. "A lot of people would have taken those options. You didn't." It was not what she expected him to say. It was better than what she expected him to say. 7 months after the licensing seminar, Callum told her he was in love with her. He did not choose a dramatic moment for it. They were in her kitchen on a Thursday evening, the one she had kept sacred for dinner, and she was making pasta, and he was sitting on the counter doing something to his phone, and he looked up at her with the particular expression he got sometimes, unhurried and direct, and said, "I think I'm in love with you." I wanted to say it when it was true instead of waiting for the right moment. She looked at him for a long moment. The pasta needed stirring. She stirred it. "I'm in love with you too," she said. He smiled and went back to his phone. She went back to the pasta. It was, she thought, exactly right. He proposed a year later in her apartment, a Sunday morning. Sunlight coming through the windows, she had finally gotten curtains for after 8 months of meaning to. He was making coffee and she was reading something and he said her name in a way that made her look up. And he was standing there with a ring, small and clean and simple, not kneeling, just standing and holding it out the way you hold out something you've decided to give. "I want to build something with you," he said. "Something real, on ground we both know is solid. I want to be the person you come home to. I want to do this together." She had set her reading down. She looked at him. Callum Reed, who said what he meant and meant what he said, who showed up on Thursdays and asked the follow-up question and didn't fill silences just to fill them. "Yes," she said. "Obviously yes." He laughed, relieved and quiet, and she crossed the room, and he put the ring on her finger and held her face in both hands and kissed her. And outside Seattle was doing its gray February thing, and in the apartment the coffee was getting cold and neither of them cared at all. They were married 6 months later. Dana was there. Callum's twin sister, Margot, flew in from Minneapolis, and she and Dana fell into conversation 20 minutes into the reception in the way that certain people immediately do, and were still talking 2 hours later. Lauren's mother cried and then denied it. Callum's father made a toast that was mostly about hockey, but landed beautifully anyway. It was small and real and exactly theirs. What Lauren had not told Callum yet, what she had only told Dana and her doctor, was that she had been trying for a long time to figure out why her body kept doing a particular thing it was not supposed to do. For 2 years, through the end of her marriage to Rowan and the year after, she had been quietly seeing a specialist about it. Nothing dramatic. Just a persistent, low-grade thing that her body was doing that made certain outcomes less likely than they should have been. She told Callum on a Sunday, 3 months into their marriage. Not dramatically, just clearly, the way she had learned to tell people things she needed them to know. He listened. He asked questions that were practical and specific, because he was Callum, and that was how he showed that he was taking something seriously. And then he said, "Whatever it looks like, I want it. All of it, whatever we're working with." He said it, the way he said things, like he meant it and had already decided. She found a new specialist, a reproductive immunologist, referred by a colleague who had been through something similar. The doctor's name was Dr. Anand, and she was precise and unhurried and reviewed everything Lauren had documented over the past 2 years. Every appointment, every cycle, every result, with the thoroughness of someone who understood that the details mattered. "There's a pattern here," she said, after an hour. "Your immune system is responding to pregnancy the way it would respond to an infection. It's not that your body can't do this. It's that your body has been in a state of chronic stress for a long time, and it's been protecting itself." Lauren looked at her. "What does that mean for next steps?" Dr. Anand told her. The plan was specific, targeted, and did not involve anything Lauren hadn't tried before in some form, only in combination, and with different timing. She adjusted one medication, added one supplement, and told Lauren the most important variable was the one that was finally in place: stability. "Your life looks different than it did 2 years ago," she said. "That matters more than people think." Lauren said yes to the plan. She went home and told Callum. He nodded and asked 2 practical questions, and then made her a cup of coffee and sat with her at the kitchen island, where they did most of their real talking, and that was that. 5 months into Dr. Anand's protocol, on a Tuesday morning in November, Lauren stood in the bathroom with a test in her hand. She had done this before. She knew the particular quality of those 2 minutes, the way time behaved differently in them, slower and more absolute than regular time. She had taught herself over 2 years to expect nothing during those minutes, not as pessimism, but as protection. She looked down. Positive. She read it again. The word did not change. It sat there on the white test in her white bathroom, quiet and perfectly clear, and the most significant thing she had ever read in her life. And she stood there for a long time without moving. Then she sat down on the edge of the tub. She held the test in both hands. She looked at the ceiling. She had spent 2 years training herself to be careful, to be reasonable, to not want things too loudly in case the wanting cost her something. And she understood suddenly, sitting there on the edge of her bathtub, that she had earned the right to want this loudly, that the careful, quiet version of herself had been doing the best she could and had also been through enough. She let herself feel it, fully, without protection. It was enormous. Callum was in the kitchen. She could hear him moving around, the specific sounds of his morning routine. She now knew the way you come to know the sounds of a shared life. She walked out into the hallway, and she held up the test when he turned and looked at her. He was across the room before she had time to say anything. He pulled her in and held on. She pressed her face into his shoulder and felt him breathing, felt the moment land in both of them. "Hi," he said into her hair. She laughed suddenly. "Hi." His arms tightened. They stood in their kitchen in November, with the coffee going cold on the counter, and the test still in her hand, and neither of them moved for a long time. The first appointment was at 10 weeks. Lauren on the table, Callum beside her, holding her hand with both of his. The ultrasound technician was quiet and professional, and then she tilted the screen and Lauren saw it. One clear, unmistakable heartbeat. She exhaled. Callum made a sound that was not quite a word, and then the technician said gently, "Actually, I need you to look again." Lauren looked. Two heartbeats. Callum pressed his forehead down to her hand and stayed there. She could feel him shaking slightly, with a particular quality of shaking that has nothing to do with cold. She thought about room 312 and the drive back from Portland in the dark. She thought about the cafeteria table and the 11 minutes. She thought about Dr. Anand saying, "Your body has been protecting itself." She thought about a woman in a corner chair holding a stuffed rabbit and the strange grace of what had come from that night. Not in spite of how hard it had been, but somehow inseparably from it. She thought about Callum standing in the kitchen with a ring in his hand on a Sunday morning, saying, "I want to build something on ground we both know is solid." This was the ground. The babies were born in the spring, on an April morning when the city was doing something tentatively bright outside the hospital windows. Rose came first, quiet and wide-eyed in a way that made the nurses murmur. Henry came 4 minutes later, red and emphatic about it, which made the room laugh through everything else. Callum held her hand through all of it, and when they placed Rose on her chest, he bent his head, and she felt him breathe out, long and slow and full of something she recognized as relief that goes all the way down. "You did it," he said softly. "Look at them." "We," she said. "We," he agreed. Dana arrived 2 hours later with flowers that were, objectively, too many flowers, and looked at the two small faces and sat down in the chair beside the bed and said nothing for almost a full minute. Then she looked at Lauren with an expression that said everything she was not going to bother putting into words. Lauren looked back. She understood completely. Natalie sent a message that evening. Simple, warm, 2 sentences. "Heard from a mutual friend. Congratulations, Lauren. You deserve every good thing." She read it twice. Then she set her phone down on the windowsill and looked at Rose and Henry in their small adjacent baskets, breathing in the same slow rhythm, their faces so new and complete and present that looking at them was almost too much. Callum was asleep in the chair, his head tipped back, still wearing his hospital band. And she looked at him and felt something she had been a long time learning how to feel without a ceiling on it. She had walked into a hospital in Portland 3 years ago not knowing what she was walking into. She had sat in a cafeteria and counted 11 minutes. She had driven home in the dark and stood in a hallway and looked at 2 coats on 2 hooks, and she had known, without being ready to know it, that everything was about to change. It had changed, not into less, into more and more solid and more honest than anything she had believed herself capable of building. When she was 34 years old, standing at a copy machine at 11:47 p.m. with a phone call she almost didn't answer. She reached over and took Callum's hand, the one closest to her. He stirred slightly without waking, and his fingers closed around hers. That small automatic thing, that reflex of a person who, even half asleep, knew where she was and reached for her anyway. Outside, the city was doing the April thing, tentative and bright, and not quite sure of itself yet. Inside, the room was quiet and warm, and exactly right. She held on.